So let's just imagine Micah's a masonry contractor and Beckett is a flashing contractor. There's flashing that should be done by Micah because he's like on site and he's doing the masonry and he's got this piece of flashing. He doesn't want to have Beckett come in from, where do you live in Independence. Okay, he doesn't want to have Beckett come in from Independence every time he needs a piece of flashing to install it. You don't have to want to wait for him. You want to install it yourself, right? So Micah's flashing, it should be under a different specification if it's going in his masonry, and then he's responsible for providing it. Now, in other cases, Beckett might be responsible for like flashing around a roofing or something, and then you have to come to the job site from Independence and do it. And Mike has nothing to do with that. So by doing the keynoting from the master format, you can let them know who's responsible. So how does it work in the real world? Typically, if you don't do it, if you just say flashing, Beckett will see flashing. He's like, I'm a flashing contractor. I got to put that in my bid. Micah will see flashing in the masonry and he's like, well, I don't want to, I'm going to have to put that in myself. I'll get my metal supplier to bend me up some flashing and I'll put that in because I don't have to wait for the other guy to come in. So now you've both got it in your bid. So what happens then typically is the general will be like, okay, who's good at a meeting? They'll go, who's doing the flashing? And Mike is like, oh, I got that in my bid. And Beckett's like, I got that in my bid. Well, obviously you're both not going to do it. So then what happens is the contractor says, okay, Mike, it makes more sense for you to do it. Beckett, give me a credit because you don't have to provide the flashing. So the contractor then gets Beckett to give him a credit because he's not providing the flashing anymore. Does the owner ever see that credit? No. That all goes into the contractor's profit. But what happens if Micah sees it and Micah sees the flashing? He's like, Beckett's going to do that. I'm not going to put it in my bid. Beckett sees the flashing. Micah's going to do that. I'm not going to put that in my bid. Now nobody's got it. Now, does the owner have to pay more for that? No, the contractor has to eat that. He has to say, okay, Micah, how much are you going to charge me for the flashing? Micah goes, I had $5,000. And Beckett's going to say, well, I had $10,000 in there for that. And he's like, okay, Micah, we're gonna have you do it for 5,000, and then the contractor eats that. So they're making money where people have double counted it, but they're losing money where people didn't count it. And I wish I could tell you that it's all figured out and everybody knows exactly who's doing what and stuff never gets double counted or missed on the project, but that's not the way it works. It's all screwed up. Some people miss things, they double count it. And so by the reason they do this master format keynoting is they're trying to make it more clear who does what on the project. That makes sense? And this is like a real issue. If you don't mind, let's just get up for a second. I noticed something in the stairway as I walked up here that'll help us visualize this.
Those glasses are pretty good. That's wild. That's wild. Wait, you never said that to me. I didn't meet you. Like, gave your glasses on, so. Yeah, that's not how that works. 2080.
Yeah, 2021.
Okay, I've set this class up, so I'm trying to make it so you learn what you need to learn right about when you need to learn it on Habitat. So this week we're going to talk about dimensioning. Um, and so let's go ahead and look at my PowerPoint on dimensioning. Okay. So you typically do dimensions at 3/32 font, all caps black. You do diagonal ticks. Architects don't use little arrowheads on their dimensions. They use diagonal ticks. That's what this little 45-degree angle line is. The dimensions go above the line. They don't stop the line and then float in the middle of the line. The line runs all the way through and the dimensions are above. You suppress 0 feet, so you don't show 0 feet, 11.5 inches. You just show 11.5 inches. The leaders don't touch the item. There's a little, this line's called the leader. This is called the dimension line, and that's called the tick. So the leader doesn't actually touch the item. Now, Revit's got this all kind of idiot-proofed, and AutoCAD does if your people have set up your dimensions properly, but it's possible to mess this up if you set up your own dimensions and you don't know what you're doing. But you do always show 0 inches. So you don't show 0 feet, but you always show 0 inches. So if I have a 10-foot 0-inch dimension, I always show the 0 inches. Any questions on any of that? Okay. So dimensioning, best way to dimension stud walls. I found this on an online forum. Now this is actually pretty smart. If this person hasn't been on the field or they're starting out in their career, apparently this office has a difference of opinion inside the office of how they dimension. So this person says, from what I've seen, architects dimension interior walls one of 3 ways. Finish of face of finish to face of finish, face of stud to face of stud, or center of stud to center of stud. They do face of finish to face of finish, but he says it makes the least sense to me. We wouldn't dimension something that doesn't yet exist, but it seems like a lot of architects do it that way. So they say the architect should communicate the intent, which is a 5-foot wide corridor, and leave the rest to the contractor and framer. It seems to me the clearest way to do it would be to face of stud or center of stud, since there can be no confusion as to which side of the line the studs go. So anyway, let's move on to what the contractors came back with. I dimensioned a face of stud for exterior walls and interior walls. Having snapped out decks and snabs for wall plates, that is what I prefer, and that is what preferred by the framers and builders I know. A note is on all plans stating that unless otherwise noted, exterior walls are 2x6 and interior walls are 2x4. A key is used to call out exceptions. Now, what I didn't have highlighted is kind of interesting. They actually have a symbol in this company where they have doors have a symbol if they're centered or snug or dimension to the center line. So I'm going to talk about how I do it, but that's one way of doing it. And then this next person says, I prefer framing lines. It saves a lot of time. I can just snap out the lines without having to compensate for anything or back check. You know, when you guys get lazy and decide that a finished 2x4 wall is 5.5 or 4 inches thick. So it's possible in hand drafting or in AutoCAD to not draw your walls the actual thickness of what they are. Now, Revit, you're actually modeling it in 3D with a 2x4 stud at 3.5 inches, right? So you can't fudge it, but you can fudge it in AutoCAD. There's no law that says you can't draw your 2x4 walls at 5 inches thick in AutoCAD because you're drawing 2 lines, right? And on hand drafting, who knows what the heck you're doing, right? You're just drawing lines, eyeballing it off your scale. So let me talk about why I believe the best way of dimensioning is to the face of stud, which is what we're doing on the Habitat house, or it's face of core in Revit world. My first job was with a design build firm, and I went out in the contractors that were working for us, and I would talk to them on the job sites, because I'd be like, okay, I did these drawings, tell me what's wrong, tell me what I could improve. And they said they always wanted me to go with face of stud because it made it easy to lay out walls. The other ones, if you go to finish face and center of stud, they have to do math in their head before they can figure out where they're gonna snap those lines. Cause like this line is 3.5 inches wide for putting a 3.5 inch stud wall on there. And they have to do math in their head. Now, having said all that, your employer might have a certain standard that you have to follow. But I'm gonna try to convince you why snapping to face of stud makes most sense. So once those lines are snapped, they actually use those snapped lines on the deck. So you can see here, here's the line snapped on the deck with the chalk lines. And now this person is actually going to be building the stud wall, laying flat on the deck, and they're using those snapped out lines to mark where they have to put their partitions in the wall. So I'm gonna show you two quick videos. One shows how they go through and lay out these studs. I wish Daniel was here because he was a carpenter. He can tell me if they did it this way or not. And then I'm going to show you this where they're actually, we'll skip to the parts where they show them laying out the house with the chalk line. So let's first watch what's involved with the contractors to figure out where they put the studs in the stud wall.
That's what we did.
When you work construction?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wall framing is the art of marking meaningful hieroglyphics onto wall plates that represent finished wall. Begin by stacking the top and bottom plates together. They should be exactly the same length, or the wall will never be square. Hook one end of the wall plates and work your way down to the other, marking the centers and rough opening size of all windows and doors. When you reach the end, hook your tape on that end of the plates and work your way back, marking stud layout. For 16-inch on-center framing, the first stud line goes at 15.25 inch, which places the center of the stud at 16 inches. Following studs are also marked 3/4 of an inch before the red stud marks on your tape measure. 31.25, 47.25, 63.25. The line marks the edge of the stud, and the X indicates on which side of the line to put the stud. Keep marking through the rough openings because partial studs will go above and below the window opening. When the plates are laid out, spread them apart, frame the window openings, and then fill in the studs. We'll cover framing window openings in another video. Okay, so that's the fine points of laying out the stud walls. Now I want to show you the time lapse as you know, I don't know if you know this, I probably showed you other time lapses. I love construction time lapses. So I'm going to skip around on this, but I want to show you like when they're laying out the walls and framing the walls down low.
So we'll snap this back wall first. There's a separation detail between addition and existing. So we'll snap 5.5 back wall on here. We can snap these guys, go parallel across, and go from there.
Well, they're marking where the anchor bolts go. So the reason I marked to the face of the stud is that they don't have to do any math. They just see these two lines that are 3.5 inches apart and they put their stud right between them. They don't have 5-inch lines and then they have to figure out what's in the center of a 5-inch line. It's just, or a 5 inches on plans. They don't have to do any math to lay it out. So you see them looking at the plans that we're making, and then they lay out the studs, build the wall flat, and then they tip it up. You can see there, they've done their layout. They're building the wall flat based on these two plates that have been laid out. This is California, so they have to put those horizontal blocking between the studs for, those little horizontals are for earthquake resistance. So that's for lateral stability in an earthquake. You don't have to do that in Wisconsin, but you do out in earthquake zones. And here you can see how the double top plates like overlap each other. So that's how they tie the walls together with the double top plate. So if you're scared of heights, imagine that like you're walking around on top of walls, laying out floors. No safety harness tie out because there's really no way to tie yourself off because there's nothing up above you yet.
Doing all right. We're having fun out here.
So this is why people my age aren't typically working construction, because like my sense of balance, like if you saw like I walking across the top of a 2x4 stud wall, there's no way. It's not going to happen when you're 60 some years old. So it's not a bad idea to, if you are older, to do something like we're learning for, where you're not going to injure yourself. The only injury we're going to get in our profession is maybe carpal tunnel syndrome and then mental illness. Right? It's not going to be a physical injury. So that's the purpose of the rim board or the rim joist, is to stabilize these things as they put them up there. So now you can see I'm using construction adhesive for the second floor deck. And then they use that just like the slab on grade, where they start snapping lines and laying the walls out once they get the second floor installed. So you can see those marks on the studs, the plates where the studs are gonna go. They're building the corner there. So this looks like a big honking micro lamb. They're calling it a Versa lamb out in California. Beam that's going across. And again, walking, no safety net. These are, these are the rafters. And they're using just toenails to put them onto the roof. They'll probably put a Simpson hanger in later. Now, just to let you know, on our Habitat Workday, we have like veto power if they tell us to do something that we think is too dangerous or I think is too dangerous. So the last one we did, they had us working basically on simple stuff like putting Tyvek on or pouring the footings. But then at an afternoon shift, they wanted us to crawl up inside the trusses and put these 2-foot blocking pieces like they did in the studs up between the trusses. And they didn't have a lift or anything, so they wanted us to actually hang on the trusses after we climbed up there on the ladder and nail it in. And I'm like, nope, time out. We're not professional construction workers. We're not going to do that. So if you do go to the job site and there is something that you're asked to do, and I don't hear them ask you to do that you're not comfortable with, we have total veto power of what we do. I don't think they're going to have us do anything dangerous because this is an existing house, but just keep that in mind. I'm scared of heights, so I just get creepy looking at these guys walking around 2 stories up. Okay, I'll let you watch the rest of this if you want to. But first off is have a lot of respect for the people that actually build your designs when you're on the job site. It's a really tough job. And if they make mistakes, it's they're typically trying to do a good job. They're not trying to mess with you. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue on with my PowerPoint. So my strategy on dimensioning doors. So most doors are tight to an intersecting wall. So I do not dimension those because that's really, depending on the kind of trim you have, like on a commercial door, you're just trying to get probably 2 studs in whatever you're doing there with metal studs. So I'll let the contractors figure out. They know I want the door so that it opens up at a 90-degree angle and it's not like the doorknob hits the wall because it's too close to it and it won't open 90 degrees. So I let them figure it out. I don't dimension where these doors are. Now, so this is HSR's drawings for this building. If you have a door that needs to be centered on the room, I will typically tell them to center it. Now, to me, it looks like this door side light combination needs to be centered in the room. So I probably would have put a dimension in there. Or I'll dimension it to one edge. So like, for example, they needed to get this door away from the little goofy HVAC thing in the corner. So they gave a dimension to the edge of that door of 5'10". So this has 0 dimension, this has 0 dimension, this has 0 dimension. So we don't ever have to dimension exactly where these walls go if they're in your typical location up against the wall. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how they actually dimensioned it in the Integrated Tech Center. Now, again, this was done in AutoCAD. So this is a type Y wall. So you see the little lollipop with the Y. So this is type Y. So it's a 3 5/8 inch stud with 5/8 inch drywall on both sides. The actual dimension finish face is 4 7/8, but they didn't want to put 4 7/8 in every time that they dimensioned a wall. So they actually just rounded it up to 5, and that's what they put on the plans. So if your dimension is at 5 and you're putting a 3 5/8 inch steel stud, how much, where do we put that on the plan? What kind of math do we have to figure out? So in relation to 5 inches, where does my 3 5/8 inch stud? What's the dimension on each side from the 5-inch dimension to where the stud actually goes? Anybody come up with that in their head? Yeah. So let's do the math. So 3 5/8 it would be 5/8 inch if it was actual, right? Because it's 5/8 inch drywall on both sides. So it's actually 5/8 plus a 16th, right? Because it's got to get up to 5 inches. So it's 5/8 plus the 16th. So that's 10. So it's really 11/16 in on both sides. Does that make sense? So these poor people laying out this thing, when they were snapping out walls, they had to do 11/16 in from the 5 inch dimension to where they were actually going to snap the line for their 3 5/8 inch stud. Does that make sense? No, it's very hard to do. So let me show you how I did it when I was in the real world. So I was using the same kind of stud wall, 3 5/8, and I just dimensioned to the face of the stud. So now if I'm the poor carpenter having to lay out these walls, I don't have to do any math at all in my head, right? So that's why I do it that way. Now you don't have to, you notice on both these commercial projects, we dimensioned every wall that we went through, we dimensioned some thickness. So there's 8-inch masonry with some furring on it. There's the 5-inch stud wall. Every time you went through a 5-inch stud wall or that 5-inch nominal stud wall, they dimensioned it. Same thing on this commercial building. And this was at an 1/8 scale plan. We dimensioned every stud wall. Because there's like different kinds of walls. There's like masonry walls with furring on it, and there's other walls. So a lot of times they will dimension through the studs. Now, on a residential, like that first form we found on the internet, you don't have to show the wall thickness at every wall. And it's often done on residential projects because typically we have 2x4s on the inside and 2x6 on the outside. So that saves time and it makes the drawing cleaner. So on the assignment, I'm giving you a Revit file. And I did an actual note that says typical interior 3.5 inches, typical exterior 5.5 inches. And then you can also say, something in the general notes to cover it. A typical note covered it as well. So that's the way you don't have to show the thickness on every wall you cross through on a residential project. So let's talk about exterior dimensions. You have 3 strings. The overall from one end of the house to the other is on the outside. Every jig and jog is on the next one in. And then the windows and doors, if they need to be dimensioned, are the ones closest into the house. So this is, again, what I'm going to give you for the assignment to go ahead and dimension it. And in this case, I wanted it dimension centered on my 24-foot garage. So in that case, I dimensioned it to the center line. And I've got another slide here, but you can see here's another one. Now they drew their closets at 2 foot 1 deep because they wanted them 2 foot deep in the finish when they put the 1/2 inch drywall on. And I'm also okay with that. 2 foot or 2 foot 1, I've seen them go both ways. But you typically dimension your inside partitions on the inside and your outside partition on the things on the outside wall or on the outside. You don't dimension your interior partitions on the outside. You dimension the inside stuff on the inside and anything in the exterior walls dimension on the outside. So as I mentioned, if you don't know the actual window dimensions, it's fine to just dimension them to the center. If you dimension them to the edge is good if you know the exact size of the window, or if I need that window to be like 3 foot 5.5 from that outside corner, I can go ahead and dimension that. But then when you have grouped windows where the windows are coming individually, but you're going to put some studs in between them, you typically dimension that so they know how far those windows should be apart. So in this case, I've dimensioned this as 4.5 inches, which would be 3 studs, right? 1, 2, 3 at 1.5 is 4.5 inches. Now you can see here, I did not round this up to the nearest 4. I did not change my dimensions on this house to the nearest 4-inch module, but we're doing that on Habitat just to kind of talk a little about modules. So one of the keys to getting good interior dimensions is to line up your room tags so they don't interfere with dimensions. So if I had this dining room tag up there and my living room tag up there, I couldn't run this dimension string through without hitting one of the room tags. So try to keep your room tags all lined up because then it avoids you hitting them with dimensions. Now you'll notice back in the old days when I was drawing these by hand, I would call out, instead of doing a room finish schedule, I would just do a line and then the room finish underneath. So every room name also included the finish. So now let's talk about dimensioning. You typically want to line up your dimension strings through the building. So figure out a place where you can catch a bunch of stuff and then run this through that location. So I actually ran that through this location so I could get each side of my stair. And I could get this closet and these little rooms here. See, so if I dimension the powder room and the master closet, I don't have to give them another dimension for the master bath because these two walls, this dimension string actually gives them the location of both walls on that left and right of the master bath. So here again, I picked one where I went through. Now you notice I did not dimension all my cabinets, like how wide they were and exactly where all this stuff, like the refrigerator went. I let the kitchen designer figure all that out because they can do like filler panels and they know the modules they're going to do. So in my kitchens, I don't go through and dimension all the cabinets. Now notice here again, I've got a string that lets me pick up this wall, and then how deep that's projecting out there. And when I went up and down on this string here, it lets me pick out this opening for these architectural columns I had between the living room and the dining room. So the key on dimensioning is don't show more dimensions that are needed and don't show less dimensions than are needed. So let's talk about these two red lines individually. Why didn't I dimension this one up and down? Why is there no, yeah, so the outside wall gives me that dimension, right? Because if I know the outside dimension and there's no other partitions there, I don't need to give them an interior dimension. The second answer is if they added up all these, this would give them the interior dimension as well. Same thing with this one here. Since this is lined up with an outside wall, and I've also got a dimension string here, it would be overkill for me to run a dimension string through there because I've given them the two things they need. This gives them the overall room dimension, and this gives them where that opening was, but it also, if you add it up, gives them the overall room dimension. Okay, so that's my little PowerPoint on dimensioning. So now let's show you the assignment, what we're going to do the remainder of the week here. So I had this great idea that on Wednesday's class, I was going to buy some chalk lines and we got tape measures and I was going to give you a Revit plan. You're going to dimension it however you want. And then it's this little Revit plan and we're going to go down in the framing lab or out in the parking lot and we're going to try to snap the lines and see how hard it is and if we can get our building to be square. Great idea. They told me the framing lab would be open. I walked by this morning, there's a big, huge building in there. So if the weather was good on Wednesday, we would go out and do it in a parking lot, but it's supposed to be like 30 degrees and raining. And so we're going to play Wednesday's class by ear. I still think it's a good idea. I would love to do it, but I'm not going to do it out in the rain because chalk lines in the rain don't work real well. I'm not going to do it in the framing lab if the building's down there. So maybe we'll push that back to another week and have to cancel Wednesday's class. So just stay tuned on Wednesday's class. So let me talk about the assignment we're going to work on today and tomorrow's class. So remember we talked about QCR. If you get this all done today, tomorrow would be a good chance to come in. We can print it out and just have somebody QCR it yourself or have somebody else QCR it before you turn it in. So let's show you the assignment and we'll take it from there. So let's open up this Revit file. It's called Area Design House Dimensioning. And it's going to look familiar because it's what we did last studio class. So let's go ahead and open that up. And while we're waiting for that to open, I'm going to show you the assignment. So you probably should go ahead and save this to your OneDrive once it opens up with your initials at the back of it, just so we can keep them straight if we see them on Blackboard. Okay, so this is what it looks like on the sheet. Let's get into actual first floor plan because that's where we're going to dimension. So you'll notice, first off on the sheet, I did do a general note saying interior partitions are 2x4 unless noted otherwise. Exterior walls and insulated garage house wall to be 2x6 unless noted otherwise. In this case, I did actually show the garage as a 2x6. I know I told you that this is gonna be an insulated garage though. So you can probably remember this house. This is the one where you did your kitchen and bath design. Now, don't judge my kitchen and bath designs because I just did this crappy thing to just put something on there for you to do this assignment, okay? This is not my idea of what the service area isn't bad. This master bathroom design is a joke with the toilet. That's kind of my version of being comical, where it's like facing the main entry door into the bedroom. So don't take that as my design skills. So anyway, you'll notice that we have door numbers and room numbers, but they're not matching up. So we're gonna do like we did in the book. So anyway, I've started some dimensions. And you're gonna be responsible for, let me show you what you're responsible for. You're gonna renumber the rooms starting at 101 in bedroom 2. All remaining rooms should be renumbered in some logical sequence, not scattered all over. Only walk-in closets get a name and a number, smaller closets do not. So like a standard 2-foot deep closet does not get a room name or number. So then I want you to renumber all the doors to match your room numbers. I want you to dimension all 4 sides of the exterior, and all 4 sides should have an overall on the outside, jigs and jogs in the middle, and windows and doors closest to the house. Exterior window and doors to be dimensioned to edges as appropriate. The garage window can stay dimensioned to the center since it's centered in the wall. And the dimension framing between group windows, I want that dimension. Interior dimension strings should be lined up if possible. Room names, and door tags should be moved so they don't conflict with dimensions. I don't want things overlapping each other. So the contractor should be able to build the house with the dimensions given without having to scale the plan. Dimensions should be placed to avoid duplicating the same dimension in multiple locations. Doors that open against walls do not need to be dimensioned. Doors that are obviously centered, like closet doors, don't need to be dimensioned. So let's show you what I'm talking about there. I don't need to mention that door because it's up against the wall. I don't need to dimension these closet doors because those are obviously centered in there. I don't need to give them a special dimension. I'll let the contractor figure it out. Yeah, Micah.
Still dimensioning the depth of the closets.
Yes, you are going to dimension the depth of the closets. Let's go back into put your name and date in the title block and turn in a 2-scale 24x36 PDF of sheet A102 in Blackboard. So these are how you're getting the points. 4 points for exterior, 4 points for interior, 1 for renumbering the rooms and 1 for renumbering the doors. You probably can get, I don't know how fast it's gonna go. You might be able to get this done today, or you might have to work on it tomorrow's class. And then Wednesday's class, we're going to play by ear whether I can do my little assignment for snapping lines and laying out walls. Okay, any questions? Okay, so I'm giving you more than enough time to do this in class between today and tomorrow. So I expect this to be as good as it can possibly be. So if you'd like to print it out and QCR each other's or QCR your own, we can work with that. I'll let you get started on them.